Welcome to the Women at the Top podcast interview series. My name is Regina Barr, and I'm the founder of the Women at the Top Network, and I'll be your host today. For those of you who don't know us, Women at the Top is a community of like-minded women who share the WAT vision and mission. And our goal, simply put, is to empower aspiring women to lead. And we do this by providing information, training, and connections. Joining me today is Jeanette Grace, owner of Expressive Communications Consulting and Training and author of The G Factor, 8 Secrets to Increasing Your Gravitational Pull at Work. And before we get started, I want to tell you just a little bit about Jeanette. Jeanette Grace is a communication and training development expert with over 25 years of experience. And she helps leaders build psychological safety in their organizations and remove communication roadblocks that get in the way of engaged employees, strong teams, and trusted leadership. Her curiosity about people and human behavior led her to this career in creating better workplaces. She has a master's degree in communication with a minor in psychology. She understands why people get along and don't get along, and how people work well together and don't work well together. For over 2 decades, Jeanette has been teaching companies and their people how to use powerful communication to do better and to be better. In addition to her book, she's also the creator of a digital course called Be the Leader Everyone Wants to Work With. On that note, please join me in welcoming Jeanette to our podcast today.
Well, thank you, Regina. I am honestly super thrilled to be here, and I'm sure every guest says something like that, but I honestly am.
Well, we are so excited to have you here. I love interviewing strong, powerful women, and love this book in particular. Hopefully you can see it, The G Factor. I just think it's so important, this topic that we'll be talking about today. So I always like to start with the backstory of our authors. And tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this book, and more importantly, where does the title come from?
The introduction kind of, I think, gives people insight to where the inspiration came from, because I have truly, honestly, always been curious about human behavior, even when I was a little girl. And I'm the type of person that's known for striking up conversations with perfect strangers in the strangest of places and talking to them. I've always been curious about why people do what they do. Why do they say the things they say? And that's probably one of the reasons why I also minored in psychology. But this curiosity stuck with me. And as I got into the workplace, I started to notice that there were some people, and I'm sure everyone here can relate, there's some people you really love working with, and then others not so much. So I thought there's something there, and I wanted to figure out what it was. And I thought it's kind of like gravitational pull, like what draws people to certain people in the workplace and what repels them. And that's how the title came to be. So G Factor is your gravitational pull. And how do we create more of that at work?
Well, I love that. And I think we can all relate to that in thinking about some of the workplaces we've been in or that we're in currently, right? Where some people, whether you call it charisma or something else, just seem to attract those people in. And I always tell people, don't be jealous, don't get mad, at those people. Figure out what they're doing right. And you don't have to copy them, but try some of what they're doing and see what works for you. And if you don't like something, don't use it. Have you found that to be kind of what you're finding from people too?
Yeah, I think that we should have our eyes open to the people around us and what is the special thing that they have. And what I love about what you said is don't try to copy them, right? Be your own version. You don't have to be the carbon copy, but figure out if it's something that's really fantastic, how do you make it work for you?
Mm-hmm. That's what I like to tell people, because I do believe if you try to do something that doesn't resonate or doesn't fit your style, it's going to fall flat. So completely agree with you on that.
Yeah.
So in putting together and writing the book, it sounds like you did a lot of research and that you talked to a lot of professionals when you were writing the book. So tell us a little bit about what surprised you most while you were researching the book.
I did talk to quite a few people, over 800 people. And after I got the data from the surveys, it surprised me. I kind of went into it thinking, oh, I know what these G factors are going to be, what creates gravitational pull. But knowing I really needed to go to the source. So go to the workplace, go to workplace professionals. One of the ones that I thought that they would say is super important is confidence. And it wasn't in the top. I mean, it was important for some, but in large part, confidence is not what creates gravitational pull. So I think that was a huge surprise to see some of the results come out of that. And then the second surprise for me was when I aggregated that data and I started to see what are these G factors, and I went out to look for secondary research and say, who out there has studied this? What supports this? That there was an enormous body of work out there that supported every single G factor. So it just really hit home and made me go, there is something here. These people are right.
So it was very affirming, I'll bet, to see some of that. And kudos to you for doing the primary research, because I think so often I find people go out and look at things rather than finding out for themselves. And I think, the research is only as good as the person who's doing and reporting the research. So sometimes you have to be a little careful. And I like to, like yourself, go to the source. So I'm really pleased that the book and your research is based on some firsthand interviewing and then also corroborating it with secondary research. So that's great. And I think that should be helpful for people listening or watching today, that if they do choose to read your book and want to do further work, they can go to your website, or they can find other information and other sources out on the web as well.
Absolutely.
So I have to ask you, because I know other people are probably wondering this, those that are watching or listening in today, is G factor something that we're born with, or can it be developed?
That's the age-old nature versus nurture. Nature versus nurture. Yeah, I'm saying that correctly. Or sometimes the chicken and the egg. Mm-hmm. This is what I can say, that as human beings, we are born with certain personality characteristics. And I think those might lend themselves well to certain G factors. But there also is there's the sense that we learn. You're right. We learn as we grow up. We learn throughout our careers as we study. And what happens is the skills that we develop, they might be fitting with the G factor. So here's an example. Gratitude G factor. That's the number one G factor. It's about showing appreciation. And I raised my daughter, who is now an adult, that you always express appreciation. If somebody gives you a gift, you write a thank you note. And she still does it now that she's a mother. So for her, that was probably nurture. And it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Just very natural for her now. Mm-hmm. But I will say this, if you haven't been taught to do these things, or if it's not part of your personality, you can still learn it. And I've seen it happen over and over as I've been training people on G factor in the last several years. So whether it's innate or whether you're like, it needs to be nurtured, the good news is you can grow your G factor.
That's great to know. And I'm chuckling because I'm probably a lot like your daughter. I think I single-handedly keep Hallmark in business, but I could be wrong. So one little aside to the G factor question that we just spoke about, do you feel there are any differences between men or women, or, just in talking with people or in the research that you've done?
No, there are some basic human needs that we have. Like if we look into human motivation, and there's a theory out there called self-determination theory. There are 3 things that we need to be motivated as humans that apply to the workplace, that apply to employee engagement, and there is no delineation on gender. Everyone likes to, for example, be appreciated. And how we express that appreciation might need to change based on the individual and what their preferences are. So, to summarize, no, absolutely not. I would say that gender really has no bearing on G factor.
That's good to know, because it goes back to what you said before, that maybe some people are born with it and those that aren't can learn how to develop their G factor. So that's good to know. So I want to just make a quick pitch, and I did take the quiz, but for those that are interested who are watching today or listening in today, you can actually access your assess your G factor and access a G factor assessment, which is free. And you can find that at expressivecct.com/style-quiz. And I'll repeat that because some of you may or may not be able to write that as quickly as I'm saying it. So it's expressivecct.com/style-quiz. So Jeanette, what I would like you to do is tell us a little bit about what will we learn by taking the G factor assessment.
First of all, you're going to learn where your G factor is high and where it isn't so high. So because you've taken it, Regina, you see that for each G factor, you get a score. And with that, it puts you in categories. And so you get insight on maybe why you should be celebrating something that makes your G factor strong, and also some tips on maybe how you can start increasing your G factor. And I'm curious, and you don't have to share, Regina, but I'm curious what your highest G factor was, if you recall.
I don't recall what it was, and I didn't think to bring the assessment. I had printed it out and filed it away and just realized I should have had that out here. But I can tell you that overall, I have a high G factor, and that actually aligns with, I do a lot of assessments in my business, and so I've done like DISC and other things, and I'm a high I, for those who know that, and I is all about how you influence others, and that's my strongest DISC. So I wasn't surprised, but if I had to pick one, I probably would say probably gratitude, because I love to recognize and honor people's accomplishments. I'm really like, I don't want to say trained in, but like when I hear that somebody's done something, got a promotion, started a new business, had a new baby, or even on the other side of it, if they've had a death in the family, or someone recently, their young baby, 10 weeks old, was going into open heart surgery, I try to write a note to build that relationship and let them know that they're being thought of, and or if they've had a death, that they're being thought of. And I think that's also a form of appreciation, recognizing and honoring that they're going through something and that they've taken the time to share that with me. So that's what I'll say about the assessment.
Thank you. Sorry to throw that at you.
Yeah, no, good question. So I want to talk a little bit about your book. And in the book, you wrote, "Jack made me want to do better, be better, make him proud, and make him look good." Tell us a little bit about that.
Jack is hands down the best boss I have ever had. He was a phenomenal leader. And what he did relates to Grant G factor. And Grant G factor is all about giving people permission to make mistakes, and also giving yourself permission to make mistakes. So moving away from perfectionism. And he was so good at it. He gave me space. There's a lot of talk right now around psychological safety, right? Having this combination of a space to ask questions and give input, offer ideas and experiment without fear, but at the same time, having clear expectations and standards for performance. And he had that in spades. He would let me take a risk. He would let me try new things. And if I faltered, if I messed up, I knew he always had my back. He would go to bat for me. And because of that, what it did is it helped me grow tremendously professionally. It created a space where I was willing to try things to make our department better, to make the organization better. And it created an immense amount of loyalty. And that loyalty is what made me go, you know what? This isn't just for me. This is for him. I want to make him look as good as he deserves to look. So again, just he is the best leader I have ever had.
That's wonderful. And what's interesting is when you talk about the Grant G factor, so many women, I think, carry this load on their shoulders of wanting to be perfectionists. And I love that this part of the G factor or the Grant G factor allows women or whomever, to give themselves permission that it's okay to make mistakes. And understanding with that, when you take that risk and go out there and do some things, you will make some mistakes and hopefully you're going to learn from them and you move forward. So I might have to say that's, I didn't say the last one was my favorite when you asked me, but this could be one of my favorites. The last one is probably where I'm strongest, right? Was the gratitude. But the grant, I think, is one of my favorite because I think women put so much pressure on themselves to be perfect and that sometimes they're afraid to do things unless they can do it perfectly. And I don't know about the world you live in, but I don't live in that world, at least not anymore.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad that you're out there and you're speaking that because we do as women, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves and we try to play so many roles, right? In the workplace, out of the workplace. And it is frankly exhausting. And when you're trying to grow your career, you feel like you have to be perfect and you can't learn. We don't really truly grow and we don't learn if we're perfect. And for goodness sakes, who wants to work for a leader that expects them to be perfect all the time? I don't. That's too hard.
Yes, too hard. And sometimes it feels a little robotic and not real or authentic. And I think that's where sometimes we get caught up in that. I think people genuinely appreciate people who can be their authentic selves. And that also means that they make mistakes. They might have a few warts. And at the end of the day, it's all good.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk a little bit about culture at work, especially for those of our listening audience or viewing audience who are leaders, managers, and business owners. And I think more than ever, culture is a critical component when we look at the need to retain employees and engage employees. So tell us a little bit, how does G Factor help make our workplaces better?
It comes down to the research really is built around what makes you want to work with someone or work for someone. So whether it's working for a leader or working in an organization or the people that are on your team. So now that we figured out what are the characteristics of people we want to work with, that's how it impacts workplace culture. And if we go back to the example I used of, my personal experience with Jack, that was a great workplace culture. And as you said, Regina, it's about employee retention. It's about employee engagement. If I am in a culture where I like to be working for people I love to work for, I will be more engaged. When I'm more engaged, I care about my work. I want to do a better job. Companies will retain employees, and right now that's a hot topic too, right? The Great Resignation. How do we find people? It's expensive to search. It is expensive to onboard people. So I think that workplace culture can directly impact employee engagement. It can directly impact employee commitment.
I'm sure we've all heard the saying that people don't leave companies, they leave bad bosses. So when you talk about the characteristics of the type of people that we want to work with, and I think the workplace has fundamentally changed over the last couple of years. People have really taken a step back and reevaluated what kind of place do they want to work at? What for lack of a better term, what are they willing to tolerate in a workplace before it'll make them walk away? And I'll just share, I won't name names, but a Fortune 500 company executive said, and I heard it when asked about the Great Resignation, that if people wanted to leave his company, they could go ahead and leave. Oh my, right? So it'll be interesting to see what they're saying a year or two from now, if that's the kind of culture that's permeating the company, when we really need to be thinking about how do we support employees, and in particular, quite frankly, women, because a lot of women left the workplace. So now we've got to entice them to come back. And I think a lot of what you're talking about today are the things that could help entice women back into the workplace.
Yeah, I agree. And what bothers me, or what doesn't sit well with me about that comment from that Fortune 500 leader, is that you're going to lose your best people, right? It's your high performers. It's the women that are really committed to doing a good job, or men, but they are the ones who leave when it's a toxic culture, or when it's a culture where people don't feel valued and appreciated. And I read a study recently that was done last fall that 54% of employees don't feel valued by their organization, and 52% don't feel valued by their leadership.
How sad is that? That makes my heart hurt.
Yeah, and they're going to leave. And who's left then? The people who maybe are not as great or as committed.
Right. Or the people who quit but never left. That's a problem, right? That's a whole other conversation. So maybe for another day. Yes.
That's so is.
Let's talk again about your book. Your book talks about the 8 secrets to increasing your gravitational pull, and specifically talks about the 7 most sought after characteristics of the G factor. So in the interest of time, I'd love to hear you tell us about all of them, but do you have a favorite G factor, and what is it and why? And I already alluded, I think that one of my favorite is the Grant G factor.
Okay, so I'm going to give you 2. One is Grant. I agree with you. You and I are on the same page. I'm also a high I in DISC, so maybe that's why. I love Grant because that is where innovation and creativity and magic happens, when you have that space, that growth mindset. So love Grant. But my personal favorite is probably Generate. And Generate is about inspiring people and being infectious. And when I say infectious in a good way. There was a study done by the consulting company, Bain & Company, that said, if you have one distinguishing strength, it doubles your chances of being inspiring. So the more distinguishing strengths you have is the more inspiring you become. And Generate G factor is all about, can I pinpoint what about me makes me beautifully unique, and how do I use that to inspire others in the workplace so that we all elevate, so that we all rise. And I like to call it your superpower. And my superpower is being quirky. And most people would go, what? Really? Your Generate G factor is about being quirky? But it's like, I have been my entire life. And it's what lets me get maybe creative in how I approach things, make them a little fun and entertaining when I'm working with clients. But it always made me a little bit of the odd person out growing up. So I have a real affinity for people who feel like that, and I can see them on a team, and I see them and they know I see them, and then I can bring them in. And so it's one of the coolest things I get to do.
That's fabulous. And thanks for sharing your quirkiness with us today.
You're welcome.
So since you've published your book, you've had the opportunity to work with a number of organizations and a number of individuals on their G factor. And I know, I can tell just from talking with you today that has been very rewarding for you. So tell us, how have you been able to help people grow their G factor? Because it seems like your G factor in some ways is a very personal thing.
It is. So, one side of this is how do I help them, right? I help them through, obviously the book. I've presented this globally in like just very small, 15, 20-minute presentation, all the way up to a 2-day intensive workshop with leaders. So it really runs the gamut of how I do it. But I would say really it's the result that comes after. I had someone in that 2-day intensive workshop that wrote a testimonial for me that was really beautiful. And she said, I've been to a lot of leadership trainings, and by far this one is the most helpful, because I'm going to be able to go back and create more connectedness and more productivity with my team. And I had someone in my digital course who I was so excited for her. It was around gratitude G factor. She had everybody on her team write the reasons they appreciate their coworkers. And then she gathered all of those and she took a picture, and they were spread out all over her desk. And then she was going to redistribute those to each person on her team.
How wonderful.
I know. I'm like, I want to work for you. I was
exactly
so excited for her.
Sign me up. I'm an entrepreneur like yourself. And I always tell people, gosh, my boss, she's terrible. She's a driver. And of course, I'm talking about myself, right? And, that's something I'll say, I know we're talking about G factor as it relates to other people, but since our audience is mostly women and corporate, it's that sometimes we have to remember to be gracious and grateful to ourselves and show ourselves some gratitude in whatever form, way, shape that might be. So I can't believe it. I'm going to say this, but we are winding down on time because the time just flew today. And I always like to end with asking, is there one piece of advice that you can offer to our viewers today?
I would say, be honest with yourself. Take a good look at where your G factor is. And if you don't know, you can take that assessment, but look for clues. Are people, do they avoid you? Do they, you ask them for something, they take a really long time to get back to you? Do you feel like you're constantly getting passed up for the really cool tasks or the promotions or the opportunities? And as a leader, really being honest and saying, am I retaining my people? Are my employees motivated? Are they happy to be here? Are they doing their best work? And when you evaluate that and you're really honest with yourself, if you come to a place and you're like, you know what? Yeah, it's not as good as it could be, and I want it to be better, then reach out to me, because this is what I do. This is what I love to help people do. I laugh sometimes and say, sort of jokingly, but I want to rid the workplace of bad leaders. Now, I don't think I'll be able to do that, but I'm sure going to give it a heck of a try. In my heart of hearts, in my soul, I want to create workplaces where people just love to be, because when they do their best work. Everybody wins.
Well, I'm right there with you. And I love that you'd love to rid the workplace of bad leaders. So we will support you in that endeavor. So with that does conclude our interview with Jeanette Grace. And just a reminder, you can learn more about Jeanette at www.expressivecct.com. And I want to just take a moment to say thank you so much for being here with us today, Jeanette. We really appreciate it. And finally, for those of you who are still here with us, please don't forget to visit reginabarr.com, where you can learn more about our upcoming podcasts and other events under the event page. And with that, I just want to say thank you all for being here today and have a great day.